You want to believe the words of the chief diplomat of the country that we are not getting direct financial benefit from this. But there's also what you call unconventional diplomacy and the dividends that yields out of it. You and I would agree that Ghana has not been, on the good side of the U.S. in terms of U.S.'s foreign policy. And I said the last time that it is not a case of Ghana alone. Ghana is not an outlier. What is happening is that we are just Ghana's situation is a product of U.S.'s foreign policy that is seeking to recalibrate across, the globe. But I think that there is always a means to resolve some of these backlash and the diplomatic role between U.S. and Ghana. And I think that as much as we are not having direct benefits in terms of say finances or in terms of funds, I think that this is one of the ways, and this is my thought. This is one of the ways that probably the current administration is seeking to change US's perception, as to how it deals with Ghana going forward, and compromise some of the harsh position US has taken against Ghana. So they may not be direct financial resources, but when you argue, and this is the argument of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration, that the US approached Ghana as part of the country that it considers friendly allies. And if you understand, the milieu, the psyche of the current US administration, which is what I said, is a transactional, pragmatic regime or government, then what Ghana is doing in a way, in to Ghana's benefit, maybe it will help to change some of these recent, policy initiative that US has taken against Ghana. Maybe it helps with the visa arrangement, which has been reduced from 5 years to 3 months. Maybe there is a waiver, for the MCC that has been terminated. Maybe there is a waiver for a number of these things that US has reversed towards, Ghana.
You're watching the AM show now. If Dr. Nanaya Breku was a soothsayer, today would probably be giving him his stone. But while Ghana secures a diplomatic breakthrough as the United States reverses the visa restriction imposed on the country in July this year, restoring the eligibility of Ghanaians for the 5-year multiple entry visas, along with other enhanced consular privileges. But the question we're asking this morning is that could Ghana have gotten more than this following the U.S. migrant deportees deal? What really is in this transaction for Trump? Well, joining me this morning is Dr. Nanaya Mreku, international relations expert. You heard his voice earlier. And as well, we're joined by Dr. John Osai Kwapon. He is CDD fellow. Thank you for joining us this morning. They're joining us via Zoom. I'll come to you, Dr. Mreku. So you have just listened to yourself again on the show because we spoke somewhere last week concerning this deportees and what could really be in it for Ghana. Sorry about that. But this morning, let's talk about the visa restrictions that have been lifted. First of all, your initial comment on this.
Well, good morning to the viewers. Thank you for me in your studios.
Do I have Dr. Mreku? Okay, we'll reconnect with him again, but I've got Dr. John Osai Kwapon here. Doc, thank you for joining.
Hello?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Nearly not audible, yes, but so let's try again.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm on the run as I speak to you, so please pardon me.
Okay.
So, like I said, Ghana, in that video, I had projected that Ghana might not benefit directly, have any financial benefit, but there's what you call unconventional diplomacy, and the dividends that comes with it. So, I was expecting that every foreign policy is pursued with the national interest. And so if Ghana is accepting deported West African migrants, we might not have direct financial benefits, but there should be something in for us. And I projected that the Trump administration, and I've said that this is one way we engage them. I have said that Trump always wants something. When you bring something to the table, he gives you a check. And so going into these negotiations, if we did not have any benefit financially, I was expecting that we were going to score something out of it. And rightly so, as observed, I believe that the current visa arrangement is because of some arrangement that we are having with the U.S. embassy. So this is not coming to me as a surprise because, as I said, and as you play the soundbite, I saw something coming, in this, direction. I'm only hoping that going forward, there will be more detailed explanations as to how this arrangement will be carried forward, because we need to know, what it entails. If it's becoming not just an MOU, but something substantive, then it has to be tabled for some thorough discussions.
Okay. But for this deportees, but for this arrangement, whether it's an MOU or not, what other factors do you think the foreign minister really could have used as a trigger to negotiate for these restorations, the visa restorations?
Well, and you see, we must always take a clue, not from precedents, but the kind of engagement that the foreign minister has with the U.S. If you recall, the U.S. government approached Ghana as a friend in the capacity of a friendly ally, to help it pursue its immigration policies of accepting West African migrants. And I've always made the point that for now, there seems to be some waning popularity of the West in our part of the world, in Africa and in West Africa. And Ghana offers a very stable, relatively stable democracy for engaging the U.S. and pursuing its national, policies or national interests. So I think that quite apart from this, another leverage we can pull is to how, a relatively stable democracy the country is, and looking at the waning popularity of Western influence in our part of the world. This was another leverage, that we could pull. And so, I mean, like I said, we need to know how the Trump administration thinks of itself, and then going forward, how to engage the government. This is one of the things that I'm sure we are learning, that if we are able to meet the U.S. government in some way, some of these leverages are going to be, some of these harsh policies are going to be waived, in my opinion.
Okay, stay with me. Let me bring in Dr. Osei-Kwapong. Doc, so is this politics or results of good negotiations which can amount to good governance?
Good morning, MFA. I think it's a mixture of all of it. Yes, there's no such, as we say in the US, I'm sure it's other places as well, there's no such thing as a free lunch, which means that in these kinds of bilateral relations, something's got to give, right? If I give you something, even if not immediately, at some point, it would also be nice that if you give me something in return. And it depends on what the two, whatever two countries are dealing with each other may end up deciding is in their mutual best interest. And so, yes, if there was some negotiations that have given Ghana particular results, that for me is just the way the cookie crumbles, right? It's all part of the way nations relate to each other and the way nations treat each other.
Do you think that if later, for example, this gets to Parliament for a certain form of rectification at all, because then the minister mentioned that it's just an MOU, and if it graduates or if it balloons to become something worthy of rectification in Parliament, of course, he won't fall short of that. He'll go to Parliament. Would you say that if you anticipate the things that will go into what will mean for you, a country, to take deportees, plus what you get in return, if indeed we confirm that this is in return for visa, the restrictions that we had, would you say that what we've done plus what we have received from America is indeed fair? Is this a fair playground?
I mean, when you go to the negotiation table, you always ask yourself, I mean, what can I really get, right? How hard can you drive, the bargain to get, if there are five things you put on the table, of those five things in exchange for what you're offering, what can you really get? I mean, on the balance of it, there comes a point where you have to be realistic, and get what you can at any given point. Yes, in negotiations, every so often there are turning points where you can crank up the dial and get something extra. But at this point, on the balance of it, you just have to be realistic in terms of what can you really get, and take what you can get. And now, if it moves beyond just an MOU to a more detailed bilateral agreement in terms of what does it specifically entail, for Ghana, what are the implications for Ghana in this kind of exchange? And if you look at it, and it is more than, what maybe was originally contained in an MOU, then surely you may want something more in exchange. But at this point, on the balance of it, if the foreign minister is describing it as an MOU, then you take what you can, because the context for the negotiation is an MOU.
Okay, Dr. Nana Mreku, so, I mean, of course, we do not have the details, but we can work with, on the face of it, right, what we have now. And we're usually doing we're advancing these theories based on assumptions, right? If indeed this is quite an exchange for receiving the deportees, would you say that it is a fair reward? Is this fair enough?
Look, let me state this categorically clear, that besides this arrangement, how else were we going to renegotiate our way out of some of these harsh policies, right? What is available is what you take. And then going forward, you see, we must understand that, and this is where I beg to differ from the argument that it is right for us to take in these deported migrants. But I'm hoping that this is not going to be the end, and that eventually the U.S., once they've realized that we've accepted first and second batch, if there's going to be another batch coming, in the days ahead of us, then we need to renegotiate the terms of engagement and see how we can get more from what we have now. But if this is what we have in hand, I think that is fair. It's fair enough. But going forward, if there are some other engagement that the U.S. government wants to engage with us, there are a number of issues that we can also bring up, like the termination of the Millennium Challenge Compact, as I said in that video. Some of these harsh, policies that seem to be confronting the country. I think that for now, what we have is just fair enough. But going forward, we need to have some serious conversation as to what we are getting out of. That is why I think that we need some parliamentary conversation around these things. Because you understand, if you look at Article 75 of the 1992 Constitution, it clearly spells out. And I think that, look, if the Honorable Minister has said Ghana inherited a number of MOUs that were never submitted to Parliament for approval, it doesn't make it right. Tradition is not always the best. So it needs some varying and some dynamics. But I think going forward, because we want to know and be able to argue, and get the best out of this deal, I think some parliamentary consideration going forward is best. But for now, we take what we have.
Okay. Please stay with me again. Let me bring in Nana Asafo-Adjei, Deputy Ranking Member, Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration, as well MP for Bosome Freho. Thanks for joining us this morning. I understand you're quite busy in your community or constituency. What are you up to this morning, first of all? If you can hear me, what are you up to in your constituency this morning before we get into the matters? Did I lose him? Okay. And unfortunately, I'll try and reconnect with him. His Deputy Ranking Member of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration. We're going to at least get the position on this matter at all, whether this restrictions that have been lifted is coming to them as good news, and doesn't matter what government is given for a take. Nana America, do you anticipate that once the U.S. government has just tested our pulse and they know that, of course, there's no free lunch, if at least we send some deportees, we can at least soften some restrictions? Do you anticipate that if not to use this particular MOU, subsequently it's a part of us they're going to be hitting hard? Do you anticipate this?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. Look, I have said that politics is a motivation for most policies. Indeed, politics is policies. And once the Trump administration wants to be in the good book of its, citizens, and mind you, I keep saying that the next year, November mid-election is coming up for the U.S., and Trump wants to be seen as doing something, especially in the immigration aspect. And once he's looking for third-party state to explore and exploit for them to receive, deported migrants whose nationals are unwilling or unable to take them, I foresee that once he's realized that our government is ready to receive some of these migrants, he is going to test the pulse again. I'm sure that the U.S. government would want to find out if the third party agreement could be institutionalized. And this is where I think that our government should then be very strategic, in their relationship, with the U.S. government. I am envisaging, and I want to be cautiously optimistic, that we try and make the best out of this, development, whether it is first in the national interest of Ghana, in terms of the security arrangement, in terms of the reintegration agenda. Are we only taking West African deported migrants? Because the argument of the government is that these people were, according to existing ECOWAS protocol, they wouldn't need a visa to come here anyways. There is a visa on arrival grace period. And so we're just like taking them from Nigeria or any other of these countries. But the point is that it shouldn't move beyond that, and then we begin to accept criminals, because these their backgrounds have been vetted, and according to the Ghanaian government, we have also vetted them, and so they've passed that security test. But going forward, are we taking on migrants from other places? What threat does it pose to our national security? And then even if you are continuing taking deported West African migrants, you should be in conversation with the nationals of those countries. You don't bring them into Ghana, and then that is when you want to engage those countries. It doesn't really, we can't be seen as the outsider who reaps more than they be reaped. We can't be seen as being more concerning to the needs of Nigerians than the government of Nigeria.
Right.
So I think that if you want to play it safe, we need to engage with these governments, the nationals of these governments, before we begin to bring them here. And then again, lastly, we have to find out, taking them back to their respective countries, is it really safe for them to be taken back to those countries? Because some U.S. governments, some U.S. federal courts have really placed an injunction of the deportation of some of these migrants because of security concerns back home. So these are some dynamics we need to weigh, going forward.
Okay. Let me in a bit. The cost of taking these deportees, plus the cost of getting a multiple entry 5 years visa to the U.S., the nuances, we may see that the deportees are quite a number, and then maybe the number of people who will be receiving multiple entries, 5 years, will be probably more. But I ask this question because the entire duty lies on the consular, the person who will grant you this visa. And so while it sounds very nice, it could be that maybe in the next 1 year or 2 years, it will just be a few number of people that will be awarded these visas. Am I correct? So the restriction which has been lifted on paper will look very elegant, but very implementation of it, we may not really be benefiting. Am I thinking right?
So on the face of the argument, let us first establish that these are analysis and projections we are making as to whether these restrictions were based on these deported, argument. Exactly. But granted that this is the case, I'm sure that we have in my opinion, we have a very vigilant, outspoken Minister of Foreign Affairs. And I like it when he said that international diplomacy is shying away from political correctness, and that states are becoming more emboldened in the dispensation of their foreign policies. I think that he will be monitoring. I think that the ministry will be monitoring whether indeed the visa restrictions that have been lifted and the restoration of the 5 years and multiple entry is really what is happening, and that people are really getting these visas.
Right.
Otherwise, it becomes flimsy, it becomes opaque. It doesn't really have meaning. When we want to get something out of something, and they are getting everything, we are getting nothing. So I think that the ministry will be doing their monitoring and evaluation, for want of a better word, to see how these visa restrictions, the new arrangement, fosters on.
Okay, stay with me and let me bring in Dr. Osekwapon. What are some of the challenges you envisage this current government will face integrating these deportees, especially because they have a minority that is pushing back, right? Minority says that, well, you have quite a handsome majority in parliament. Why don't you bring it? Whether it's an MOU or whatever it is, bring it and let's rectify it. What this means is going to introduce all of us into the nuances and the details that went into the acceptance of these deportees. On the back of this, what kind of challenges do you anticipate or envisage the integration of these deportees? One, they don't have family, they've never been here before. All the factors that will come to play for these deportees to feel at home.
So when you think of how you integrate them into the social fabric of the Ghanaian society, as you mentioned, no family, so how do you get them into any of our communities? How do you get them to settle into these communities? That's one challenge. Then there's the economic factor as well. They would have to be able to find a way to support themselves, or at least to be able to live and sustain themselves. And so you also then ask yourself, how is their economic life going to work out? Are there going to be opportunities for them to engage in some productive economic activities so they can earn an income, or are you going to provide them with financial support so they can live? Is this a temporary arrangement in terms of they are in Ghana just for a temporary period and then eventually be sent to their countries of origin? But again, what happens to them on the social and the economic side during that period? I'm sure the government will be fully aware also of their profiles, of who is being deported. But again, are there any security implications if some of these deportees may have run afoul of other laws beyond the immigration laws, of the United States? And how do you, ensure that Ghana doesn't become, vulnerable to any security challenges that they may have posed? So there's a whole lot of social, economic, security issues that must be taken into consideration, which I'm sure the Foreign Affairs Minister will be fully aware of in these negotiations and coming to this MOU or ultimately a full bilateral agreement that would come to Parliament for approval.
Okay. Dr. Mreku, I'm quite curious. It looks like people have become very aware of their rights, their liberties. Now, for deportees who are going to be given a place here in Ghana, they're here already. But for the discontinuation of a court matter, they were headed to court for unlawful detention. And then I'm wondering that, well, you've been deported, you're going to get a home, and you're already, you're already experimenting the laws and your rights already. Does it give the government at least an idea moving into the future that, well, it's not going to be a walk in the park, just saying that because of friendly allies, you accept people from the US and then it ends there? If these people didn't discontinue the matter in courts, the government of Ghana would be in court with these people, the same people that you're creating a home for. What does that look like for you?
Well, they still have rights. I'm sure that their rights don't cease to exist just because they are West African deported migrants. They are deportees. They still have rights, and also because they are members. They are citizens of ECOWAS member states. And there is some national law, and that what Ghana. The of Ghana's legal system, so the sanction was task force, the fact that they've been detained for more than 40 and seeking detention against their deportation to respective countries. So the thing is that it's still, like I said, their right won't cease to exist just because they are deported, migrant. I think that
I know that you are on the move, but if you could at least just reposition yourself for me, I'd see if the line will be clear this morning. We'll try again. Doc, can you hear me? Unfortunately, you can't hear me, but we're going to move on to the other part of the conversation, which I desperately will need Dr. Mreku on to have this conversation about how Ghana should have a neutral posture, or Ghana should have a non-alignment posture when it comes to international matters, especially that of Israel and then Palestine and another and related matters. But I'll try again if Dr. Mreku is on. If you can hear me, we can get into that conversation. Can you hear me, Dr. Mreku? Okay, I'll just invite Dr. Osei-Kwapon to just give me your general overview of the president's speech. I think since after that delivery, you and I have not had any conversation yet. If you followed his speech at the UN General Assembly, what do you make of it? Many have applauded it. Do you?
Yes, particularly for the critical issues that he brought to the attention of the global audience. One issue in particular for me was the issue of migration, and the stories he told about the kinds of immigrants that you would find in other societies. So he mentioned the Ghanaian American who sits on the federal bench in the US. He mentioned another Ghanaian who, a black mayor, I think somewhere in Europe. I liked the framing of that because in conversations about immigration reform that currently, for example, is going on in a place like the US, I feel like there are moments where the narrative seems to suggest that immigrants, quote unquote, bring nothing of value to the new societies in which they find themselves. And I think it was very important to get the global audience to rethink that narrative and acknowledge that, yes, there are definitely, some immigrants who may run afoul of the law in the new societies that they find themselves in. But generally, these are persons, who leave their countries of origin, find themselves in new societies, integrate themselves very well, and become very productive members of their new society. And I think it's very important that as the global, as the world thinks about issues of migration, the challenges that comes with it, and how to properly treat migrants wherever they find themselves, that we do not sort of lump all of them into one category as persons who are bringing nothing of value to a new society, but rather these are people who become very productive members of a given society. So I, in particular, was very pleased about that part of the speech. But overall, again, the issues that he brought, global attention to are issues that are ongoing, regularly do come up. For example, the reform of the United Nations, especially when it comes to the Security Council and the role of Africa as a continent in this body, and especially this powerful organ of the UN was very important. Issues of natural resource governance and how African countries can benefit more from their own natural resources. On that, I think the onus is still on the African countries who own these resources when they negotiate with those who bring in the foreign direct investment to help us extract these resources. But overall, I think it was a very good speech that touched on very important global issues.
Well, over here in Ghana, the minority says that over the years, we as a country, we're known for non-alignment. We shouldn't be aligned to and with any country, especially in matters like this for our foreign policy. And then it looks as though this government is almost looking like they are aligning to one part in this, especially for this conversation that we're having. If you look at the foreign policy as it is today, do you think that the intention of that foreign policy, as drawn years ago, still matters today? Should we have a country such as Ghana non-aligning?
You know, I remember years ago, years ago, I think I was still in secondary school, there was a NAM conference in Ghana, the non-aligned movement had, their annual conference in Ghana. And there was this thing about, this line about how non-aligned are these non-aligned countries. Overall, you would still end up having bilateral relations with some of these countries. Ultimately, I think every country has to be realistic about its place in this global world. So whilst you may take, quote unquote, a non-aligned position on certain global issues or certain foreign policy issues, in terms of, do you want to support one country over another in its rivalry over certain decisions? I think we've reached a point in the world where you ought to also be very realistic. So being realistic doesn't mean that you throw your weight behind every single issue that some of these dominant powers or other countries are engaged in. But I think that there's a balance between this idea of non-aligned and remaining neutral, but also nothing preventing you from building bilateral relationships and being able to speak on issues that a country feels it must on matters of global importance. So for me, it can't be an either-or proposition where it's this binary thing, or either you're in or either you're out. But I think there has to be room for some of these nuances that allows a country to, on some matters, remain quote unquote non-aligned, whatever that means, but also allows them to be able to also pursue their own national interests vis-a-vis the countries that they regularly engage in on political and economic matters.
Right, very well said. Thank you so much, Dr. John Osei-Kwapong, for joining us. We're unable to reconnect with Dr. Nanaya Mreku. He's an international relations expert. But for that, we're going to talk into the geopolitics, especially many of the speeches, that stage walkout as well, that happened when the Prime Minister of Israel as well was addressing the UN General Assembly. When we get, maybe in our subsequent bulletins, we shall engage Dr. Nanaya Mreku on that. But thank you for joining us on The Big Stories. We have